Hi, I'm Jeff Wilson. I'm President and CEO of Precipitate Gold Corporation. Precipitate is a Dominican Republic-focused exploration company with 3 projects in the DR, one of which is under an earn-in with Barrick Gold, and the other we are operating 100% ourselves.
Jeff, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to talk about the Dominican Republic today. Lots of things happening towards the end of last year, which had a real positive influence on your share price. We saw a real pop there. Some people took some money off the table, and that's fine.
Yep.
Don't mind that. Let's start with because the two of the companies we're saying are important, Barrick and then Gold Quest, right? Yes. So I think the big news at the end of last year, and obviously a little bit of an update now, is they upped the amount of money they're going to be spending on drilling with your joint venture. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Barrick, when we initially entered into the earn-in agreement with Barrick in 2020, the terms of the agreement were that they would spend $10 million over 6 years and produce a pre-feasibility study. We are 5 years into that agreement now, and they've elected through negotiation with us. We've adjusted that now, so instead of $10 million, it's a $22 million spend by Barrick to earn 70%, and we've pushed back the date on that to 2030. So they've got a little bit more time to do the work necessary, and the primary issue there was the requirement of a pre-feasibility study. And so they need a little bit more time to accomplish that if they proceed through to the 70%. So we're happy with the fact that they've, as a bit of concession for us adding a little bit more time to this agreement, they're going to spend more money in order to get to that threshold.
Right, how much work have they done?
They've spent, at April of this year, they will have spent $7 million US on the project. And so they're fulfilling all of their sort of annual requirements. And cumulatively, that's now $7 million.
But was that a case of like the bare minimum, given what else was going on in the country? It's like slight uncertainty.
Yes, it was the bare minimum. They met the sort of the thresholds that they had to each year, but I would say probably not as much of that was spent on drilling as we all would have liked. But there were some issues as it relates to permitting and some land access issues that part of that stuff played into the need for the delay, but or the extension. But no, we've been pretty pleased with the work that they've been doing, and I think what we saw was coming out of the early years of that agreement, we were still sort of dealing with a bit of COVID protocol. Yeah. So work was more challenged for them at that time. Yeah. So the first couple of years, I would say it was a little bit slow, but it's really sort of elevated here lately.
Right, and was this additional $15 million to get them through to? It doesn't get a feasibility study done.
It doesn't, but it according to them, that's sort of the baseline that they would need to do an adequate amount of exploration to determine that they wanted to proceed to a feasibility. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think a feasibility study would probably potentially be tens of millions of dollars more in order to get to that threshold. So this just kind of, again, these are numbers that just helps keep them honest and keeps them, putting money into the ground rather than, sort of wasted. And I'm pretty pleased with the work they've been doing so far.
Right. And how do you protect yourself in deals like that? Yep. Say if they say, well, actually, we're done now. Who owns what?
Yeah, so basically it's an all or nothing deal. So they've spent $7 million. They spent 5 years. If they decide tomorrow that they don't see enough that is worthwhile, we get it back 100%. We've also stipulated in the agreement that there's some ability for us to be protected subsequent to getting it back, that we're not in competition with them and that sort of thing. So, I think we're well protected here, where basically what this is an opportunity for us to use somebody else's money and expertise, frankly, in the region to test the project. And if it pans out to be something that's significant enough for Barrick to want to have 70% of it, we feel that our 30% would be certainly worthwhile, especially since we're a carried interest in that.
Yeah, and just to be clear for people maybe new to the story, Barrick have got other things going on in their region, right?
Right. So essentially, part of the appeal here for Barrick was that this is ground that we sort of staked or acquired that was essentially surrounds one of their tier 1 assets called Pueblo Viejo, which is a world-class mining operation. So this is adjacent to that, surround them on 3 sides. And this is not just sort of a standalone opportunity somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It's very strategic as well. So they would love nothing more than to, increase their resource there and their throughput. They're in the process of doing a tailings expansion to increase the size of their current operations. So there's definitely a strategy here.
Right, and it's not exactly greenfields, is it, for them?
No, that's right.
They're sitting with a lot of data, and they're going to try and work at perhaps using their own data, where they should go first and the type of drilling. Do you get any input into that, or is it just a case of sit back and let them do their thing?
Yeah, we don't really have much say in terms of the, sort of like an advisory committee or a technical committee or something like that. But what we do get is proposed budgets and work programs in advance. and we get quarterly reporting from them on the work that they've done. So we're pretty well informed. We get full access to all of the data, but it's they're managing and operating the programs.
Right. Okay. Now, I guess both they and you will have been interested by the news over from Gold Quest.
Yeah.
It seems things seem to have taken a turn for the better.
Yeah, I mean, again, for people that don't know, I mean, our neighbor in the other part of the country where our Wanda Herrera project is located is a company called Gold Quest. They have their project's called Romero, which is a 3 to 4 million ounce gold equivalent deposit, depending on grades, that has been stalled, waiting for the ability to move it through to an environmental impact study and development. And it's been stalled
because they haven't got the permits to do.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting system in the DR where the president of the country has to sign a mining license in order to allow a company to do an environmental impact study. So that with
Catch-22.
Catch-22,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a political hot potato for a president of a country to sort of get involved in anything to do with mining because we all know what the perception is of mining. So they sort of altered the process a little bit such that it could go back to the Environment Ministry to go to Gold Quest and say, look, let's allow you a path forward here to get your environmental impact study done, get a feasibility study done, and then we can look at all of the data, all of the facts, and determine whether or not a license for mining is appropriate or not. So that's been a really well-received turn of events over the course of the last 4 or 5 months. So that's given not only Gold Quest, but another company called Unigold, who are in the same situation, a bit of a pathway to move forward on taking the project to the next level. And they as have we have seen a nice appreciation in share prices as the market, I think, is feeling a little bit more encouraged that this is a jurisdiction where if you find it, you can develop it.
Right. Okay. So that feels like a bit of red tape coming down and a little bit more of an understanding of how the mining process could work going forward. Knock-on effect for you is what? Because obviously you've got your own projects you've got to get after here as well. And that sort of information informs the way that you go about doing it. So what has it told you? How are you going to approach 2025?
Yeah, the reality of our business is that perception is reality. And so if the perception is that if you find a mineral resource somewhere you can't extract it, then what's the point in going to even
spend the money.
Take step one?
Yeah.
So for us, we've been sort of on pause, if you will, in that region of the country. Barrick's working on one project, but elsewhere next to Romero, we were electing to be a bit, cautious about expenditures because we wanted to see that daylight at the, if we are successful, that there's a pathway through to production. And so we've never really had any problems with respect to permitting and licenses and ability to do work because on an exploration level, we've got all that stuff.
Yeah.
We've really been sort of pausing because, what's the return on investment if we were successful in an environment where there was uncertainty? Clearing that uncertainty, thanks to our neighbors, is giving us and our shareholders and investors more confidence that there can be a return on investment. So let's get back to exploration and advancing that project, and with the belief that progress will be rewarded in the terms of share price and market cap.
Well, the other uncertainty was if you go and spend that money drilling something which is getting no value, could you go and raise new money in a market like it is? So preserving cash was number one.
Yeah, we were fortunate, again, with the Barrick transaction, going back, a couple of years ago now, there was a transaction whereby we were able to sell them some ground in exchange for $5 million US cash payment. So we topped up the treasury without having to issue any shares. It put us in a really nice cash position at that time. And, fought against some pressure to, expend that money, because we're a junior exploration company.
You were getting a lot of advice.
We were getting a lot of advice and a lot of ideas on what we could do with that money. And we did look at a lot of different things. Sure. We did site visits on a lot of different projects in a lot of different parts of the world. But ultimately...
And so some almost M&A.
Yes, definitely. Right. Yeah, and we looked at private companies, we looked at project-specific transactions, etc. In the end, we didn't really ever land on something that we thought that the terms were right and that it was in the best interest of our shareholders.
Yeah.
And also had this hope or belief that the DR was going to come back around in due time, and it has. And so, because of that, preserving that cash and not running off and doing something, chasing the next shiny object for the sake of doing something, has allowed us to be, well financed at this point in time. Situations have changed in the DR. We've got projects that we own 100%, and we're cashed up to be able to initiate programs, as we see fit.
No, I'm a big believer in that. Sometimes just sitting and waiting is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Not always easy because we don't get up in the morning to do that. But I think in the best interest of people who had put their hard-earned money into buying the shares, that we thought that was
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. Like, I think, you got some very frustrated, the market is seeing some very frustrated retail investors going, what the heck, guys, come on, do something. And we can all feel and sense that frustration. But I think I've just spoken to enough CEOs who are blowing their brains out with budgets and sitting around going, well, I've now got to raise some expensive money. So, like, horses for courses, and in your case, I guess it's turned out to be probably the right move.
Yeah, no, I'm very comfortable with where we are right now, and thankful, quite frankly, that we were able to put ourselves in a position where things did turn around. We didn't have to immediately go back to the market to raise money. So, having that position of strength financially has allowed us to, A, weather the storm, but B, be in a position to move forward.
Well, let's look at it. You got to get on with some drilling this year, but you got to get that set up right. So, what have you been doing, and when will you move through to that drill phase?
Yeah, so as much as it appears that we weren't doing much while we were sort of waiting out this Romero thing, we were doing some sort of low-level groundwork last year through sort of the summer and into the fall. We announced several, fairly positive news releases whereby, just good old-fashioned prospecting and sampling had identified some new targets within the project. So rather than standing still, we continue to do some work in new areas. And so we've added the number of targets, prospective targets on the property. We've added to that. Some of those we've gone back, done follow-up work, expanded them. Some of them we've done trenching and got a better idea of what we have. So we sort of are sitting in a place now where we already had a number of prospective targets, and several of those were drill permitted. These newer targets, because they're new, are not yet drill permitted. And so one of the things we're sort of debating here as it relates to getting drilling this year is, do we want to drill something because we have a permit for it, or do we want to see if one of these new ones becomes a priority, and in which case maybe we wait an extra couple of months to get the permit to drill our best target versus the one that we have permitted. So we're in the process now of sort of fleshing that out a little bit, identifying, prioritizing, which of these targets do we think would be the best place to start, and positioning ourselves so that we've got permits in place that no matter where we decide we want to operate, we've got the permission to do so.
Right, and in terms of targets are just that, right? It doesn't guarantee anything.
No.
So in terms of how are you going about prioritizing them?
Yeah.
What are you looking for?
Yep. No, it's a pretty straightforward process. Again, we benefit from our neighbors who were sort of there 10 years ahead of us and sort of identifying what kind of science has worked for them in terms of the discovery process. So, we start with geochem, of course, but geophysics has been a real important tool. So, ground IP has typically for us been a very useful tool for identifying, anomalies that are drill worthy. And so that will probably be part of the process here in the coming months on one or two, maybe more than one or two target areas where in some cases we have existing geophysical surveys. We need to expand them because they sort of, the anomalies were, ended. The grid ended with the anomalies still, open. So we'd like to do some extending of geophysical anomalies, targets and grids, but also some infill. So we get more detailed information on, what these sort of geophysical anomalies look like. So geophysics will be a big part of it, and that combined with sort of the geochem that we already have should ultimately be the primary tool for targeting where we're going to drill.
Right, and again, you want to be conscious of capital available to you. I know you've got a chunk of change in the bank. That's good news, right? Rarefied out, really. How do you look at that kind of preservation or giving you optionality in the future? Because you can go spend a lot of it really, really quickly and be very aggressive and ambitious and all of those wonderful things, which is fabulous when you get it right. But if you don't, it causes some problems down the line, because it doesn't feel like $3,000 gold. What's not to like, right?
Right.
Except if you're an explorer, you're not necessarily getting credit for that.
Right.
So you got to be careful. So can you talk about the conversations that you're having around that, like the speed at which you move?
Yep.
Because we're still not quite there yet, I don't think.
Agreed. And I think one of the things that we have also that, again, I like to think, credit to the company and a bit of strategy is we do own our own drills. So, we co-own them with Gold Quest. And so that was again, a strategic move. We saw an opportunity. There was a drill company that had gone bankrupt. We were able to get that equipment out of bankruptcy for pennies on the dollar. So again, we would be able to do, I think, a fairly substantial drill program this year, and still come out the end of the calendar year with, a fairly healthy treasury. So again, ultimately it's success contingent. And so I don't know that we would go in and do a 10 or a 20,000 meter drill program right out of the gate here. Right. I think what we'd want to do is again, get back to prioritizing, pick our best targets, test those targets. If the proof's in the pudding, we should see an appreciation in the share price. Should.
Yeah.
And if the requirement's there for topping up the treasury at higher prices, hopefully we can do that. So so we're still being cautious about the fact that we're still in an environment here in the capital markets where cash is still pretty precious, and so to have it is important.
Okay, capital markets, absolutely as described. What about the ministry itself? Right, it sounds like things are moving on the ground. That people they're paying attention, engaged, and all of that. Anyone here?
Yeah, no, a big turnaround from years past.
Right, okay.
The relatively newly appointed minister, this is maybe going back 6 or 8 months ago, he was appointed to the Ministry of Energy and Mines, is here, as is his vice minister. We've also got representatives from the Department of Mines, which is a separate entity sort of within the government. Members of the Canadian Embassy from the Dominican Republic are up here sort of championing sort of Canadian interests in the Dominican Republic. So yeah, and unlike years past, this minister is making himself available. He's going to be at a roundtable in the coming days. We're going to put on actually a Dominican night that we're helping to sponsor here on Tuesday night, which will...
That sounds like a lot of fun.
He'll speak there and hopefully engage with investors to sort of say we're open for business and here's our mandate and here's what we want to do. So yeah, very... just a completely different sort of demeanor and attitude coming out of the ministry now that we haven't seen before. And we're seeing the same sort of things with the Environment Ministry, which is also important to us because that's where all the permits for drilling come from. So again, I think the president of the country has put a fire under some of his ministers to be more proactive and get
Where's this come from? What's the driver here? Obviously, increased tax? Is it employment? Is because there's been like the last 5 years has been a fairly negative mining rhetoric environment to exist in. It kind of feels like people got a bit bored of that.
Yeah, I think that the DR specifically has actually, under this current administration, which this is their second term, they've been very pro foreign investment, pro business, recognizing that the economy can't be reliant upon tourism solely. Yeah. And so really trying to sort of add additional sort of prongs, if you will, to the economy. And mining, believe it or not, mining contributes something like 43% of the country's economy or something like that. Now, that's primarily out of Barrick's Pueblo Viejo. Right. But Pueblo Viejo, up until recently, has been sort of diminishing in terms of its production rate every year. Yeah. And so the government recognizes that, at the end of the day, we can talk about mines being sustainable, but at some point they start to deplete and you need to find new mines in order to continue to have that contribution to the economy. So there's been a mandate to try to sort of expedite the exploration process and development process because it's good for the country's economy. So I think that this is a president that is trying to sort of add some substance to the economy and not be solely relying on tourism as kind of the primary industry.
Get some balance to the mix. Okay, that's really that's fantastic. I didn't realize the engagement here was that significant, really. That's really good news.
Yeah, no, they're here with a purpose, and there's a pretty big contingent of them here, and members of a number of the different companies are up here as well. So I think, as I said, governments oftentimes will say things because it's what people want to hear, but I think actions speak louder than words, and I really like what I've seen so far from this ministry and ministers. So we're hoping that we can, and I've imposed upon him and upon them that thanks in part to some of the news that's come out from our neighbors recently. There's been renewed interest in the jurisdiction. Share prices are up a little bit. That this is an opportunity that they want to capitalize on, and let's not drop the ball here and get back into these long drawn out delays where people get disinterested and move on. So you've got the market's attention that this jurisdiction is open for business for mining. Let's keep that momentum going and keep the investors engaged.
Okay, well, quietly, cautiously optimistic for 2025. It sounds like.
Absolutely.
Great to catch up with you. Some good news coming out of you guys this year by the sounds of it. So stay in touch. Let us know how you get on. Okay.
Will do. Thanks for the time.